I grew up in this town, made friends, had my first crush, got into a lot of trouble. But most importantly, this is the place where I fell in love with motorcycles. And after today, I will never step foot back in this town. So I spent a lot of my childhood in this little area. It's like a pool and tennis courts and whatnot. And my grandmother used to live right down the street. This is a part of my neighborhood that I grew up in. So I guess that's where we'll start. I had a pretty normal childhood. You know, both mom and dad worked. Mom was in the insurance business, dad was in the construction business. Had an older brother, a much older brother. I played baseball, I ride bikes around, played in the woods, played video games. So the one thing about a small town is you don't know, you get so locked in, you don't realize that the outside world is what it is. So growing up, I had it made. I thought this is it, and I had no problem with that. I had a couple of close friends, and we would play video games together and go ride our bikes down some pretty gnarly paths. And I spent nearly every weekend when the temperature was good at this pool. I had everything that I needed in this neighborhood, really. There's nothing that stuck out to me out of the ordinary growing up in this place and in the family that I had. It was just a very normal life. I had a few solid friends that we always hung out together. It was just normal. It was a normal life.
Things took a bit of a turn when I was 9 years old. My father suddenly got very sick with an infection. I remember very clearly sitting at the breakfast table in the kitchen, and he collapsed. I found out later the whole left side of his body went paralyzed. That was the last time that I saw him. I wasn't allowed to go into the hospital because of the unknown. You know, at 9 years old, you really don't know the man your father is. He was in elementary school. He was my hero. That's all I knew him as. But through those lenses, you know, I had lost a very important part of my life. My father was a hard-working man, but he always made time every night. Every night we would be out in the yard playing catch until the outside lights went on. So it was tough. You know, I didn't have the necessary equipment to deal with grief and loss at that time in my life. So I kind of shut down. It was pretty tough. And the family rallied around me. Later on in life, I thought they sacrificed their own healing and their own grief, the time for all that, to make sure the child was watched over. My brother, that Christmas, gave me my first guitar, which did help quite a bit in giving me an outlet. But still, when you're a child and you're at school and all you know is childhood things, so what do you know about grief and healing and all that?
It was here I learned my first real lesson about life and about people. I was in 5th grade when he passed away. I was teased a lot in school. and bullied. All those people who spent all those years just berating me and making me feel insignificant, now all of a sudden had so many nice things to say and wanted to give me gifts and cards. And I remember my teacher at the time handed me this bag of cards, and I just looked at the names on them and pushed them to the side. They're so fake. The next few years were kind of just existing. And then my mother got remarried when I was 11 years old.
So my mother getting remarried, it started kind of a downhill spiral with me personally. I didn't dislike the guy, he wasn't my dad, you know? Things started happening though that really kind of sent me off the edge. Her stepdad was an alcoholic. He has since been recovered for God knows how many decades. But he was abusive, verbally and physically, to both me and my mother. And so here this imposter came in and started ruining things. And it was at that time that everything kind of fell apart. I started abusing drugs myself. I started getting in trouble, getting arrested. And from about the age of 14, 15 years old until I was 21, I was a pretty horrible guy. I'd got myself on watch lists and had pretty much driven a wedge between me and my family. But I say that to say that I've always kind of been the kind of person that sees, or try to at least, see the good in people. And my stepdad and I had some good moments. And honestly, if I think back hard enough, that's where my love for motorcycles came from. See, out of all the problems I had with my stepfather, there were two things that I remember very fondly. One of those was fishing, going on fishing and hunting trips with him and his dad, and motorcycles. See, he had been riding motorcycles since he was a teenager, and so I was introduced to them at a pretty young age, and I loved going to ride with him. I loved the sights, I loved the sounds. And honestly, and I've said this to him, I thanked him for introducing me to this world, because that's what led to all of this, is my introduction to motorcycles through him. I became obsessed with dirt bikes and supercross, and it wasn't until years later I'd ride my first motorcycle, but the seed had been planted.
The thing I remember most about riding with my stepdad was how much of a different person he was on the bike. It wouldn't be till later in life when I'd realize what that was about. See, for all those bad moments that I had growing up with him, and all of the trouble I got myself into as a result of me not being able to properly deal with it, it was those times that I learned to look for the little moments of joy. Later on in life, when I start riding motorcycles, it was that lesson that I learned that kind of guided me down the path that I'm on. The world is awful and unfair and unkind, and from start to finish, it's just loss. Everything is decaying, everything is getting older, everyone is dying. And it's those little moments that they really are what life is about. Those small moments of joy and happiness in an otherwise dark and miserable existence. It was this town that instilled in me that your dreams are dumb, get a real job, work 9 to 5, get married, have kids, buy the perfect house, That's a miserable existence. The moments that I shared with this man who I despised on bikes, when it came back later in life, I very clearly remember the look on his face while riding and getting that same feeling myself. Motorcycles weren't a huge part of my growing up, but they were definitely an important part.
I've said this before, motorcycles for me aren't the journey. It's about the places that you go and the people that you go with, not necessarily the journey there. For me, that's just me personally. See, I spent my entire childhood counting down the days that I could escape this place. I wanted so much to leave. I couldn't get out of here fast enough, honestly. In the midst of all my troublemaking, as soon as I was able to, I left. I didn't have any particular place in mind, but I just knew that I wanted to be anywhere but here. And I thought that would be the end of it. I kept getting drugged back to this town. You know, my mother and my grandmother still lived here. Early on, it was anytime I had some real trouble that I had to get out of, I always kind of had that to fall back on. Eventually, that had become not an option. My mother, rightfully so, had had enough and had to make a hard decision and keep me away. Stop enabling me. And there was a moment in my life where the only parent I had pushed her away and driven us apart from each other. I spent a lot of time repairing that relationship, and I would say we became very close. When I was about 20, 21 years old, I finally decided to get my act together, and I came back home to this town, and I worked on being a better person. And as a result, my relationship with my mother grew very strong. So I came out here less often than I used to. I would still a couple times a month come out here and visit with her. But I wanted to be done with this. I wanted the tether to be cut. No matter how far away I got from my hometown, I always ended up coming back to it.
So many very strong and negative memories of this place, but also positive ones. I came here to finally say goodbye to this place. You might be asking yourself, why? 2 years ago, my mother passed away from COVID. We spent a year dealing with her affairs, getting the house sold, and all that's done. And I have no reason to come back here. I don't miss this place. But the tether's cut, and I'm done with this chapter. Made friends here, had crushes here, lots of trouble here. But I can finally put it in my rear view mirror and let it be what it actually is. A memory. A foundation for who I am, who I became. But this isn't where the story starts.